And welcome back to this week's episode of What in the Fact, where we talk about crazy stories. But today we're going to get right into it. We're going to be talking about, with everything that's going wrong in the world, I decided to talk about criminals that I used to know when I was a kid or growing up, but really a criminal that I used to know growing up that is still probably out on the loose. Now, this is when I was a kid, I used to know somebody, of course, how do I say this? Let's just say if all the allegations of Michael Jackson are true, regardless of whether you believe them or not, we all know those allegations. Let's just say he had a thing for kids instead of adults. Well, fast forward, or not fast forward, but rewind to right around 2009. I was probably in the third grade. I was probably out. I was at home to a single. I was the son of a single mother. And I had a sibling. She was a sister. She was my sister. I call her my former sibling just because of how crazy she was, you know? She was really crazy, unpredictable. And, here's the thing. My former sibling, because I don't call her that anymore, my sister, because she's crazy. And she's a probation officer. But anyhow, even though I did not have a dad, my mom and sister would both act like my father. They both would beat me like my father. And I remember there was this common phrase that would go, you are so. They would go like, They would be like Ryan Gosling in Drive when he's like, you just got an innocent kid's father killed. So you better not lie to me. That's how they would talk to me. They'd be like, listen, you're lucky your father's not alive. Otherwise, in fact, let me approach the camera. Look, zoom in. They'd be like this. You're fucking lucky that your dad's dead. Otherwise, he'd really give it to you. And then I was like, what the hell? I was scared. Because I was like, what are you giving me, love taps? Because these don't feel like love taps. In fact, I have the marks still to show you. Just kidding. But, back in the day, I guess Child Protective Services didn't exist. But I don't even know if they exist now. But if they do, they probably don't do the last part in the name, service. They don't service anyone. And, sometimes they say that it's better to stay in the abusive home than it is to leave. Because you might go to a crazier household where bad things happen to you. But anyhow, it was around 2009. And I was in the third grade. I wasn't doing very good. I was never academically inclined to do anything. I was pretty bad. But looking back in retrospect, I don't know if it was, I was just delayed. I was just a delayed kid. And, of course, I'm in elementary school, third grade. It was that year I had a crazy teacher. I don't know why I kept getting I kept getting abused either verbally or physically. But there was this teacher prior to being in the class that I was then. Before that, I was in a class with a teacher who was fucking crazy. She was like Miss Trenchable. She was crazy. She was unstable. And unfortunately, she had a cop as a husband. And I remember there was this story, which it was actually really true. It was actually really true because what they said was... ignore that dog. It's a guard dog for my house. But anyhow, there was a story that her picture frame got like written a mustache on. And when they wrote that mustache on it, they wrote it on her picture frame. And there was, I don't know why this happened. I don't know why she didn't just like ignore it, or, if I was me, if I was a teacher, I would have just put the picture frame down and covered it. Or just like put it down and slid it into the trash. But she decided to go ahead and turn it into a whole debacle. And from what I heard, this was like a few years ago, or like the year before, that she got her cop husband to come in and interrogate the whole classroom, which I don't even know if that's even possible. And I don't know why she would do that. Like, there's no kid who, in the face of authority, in the face of a Caucasian cop, of any cop, is gonna say, yeah, it was me. I did that to your wife's picture. In fact, they probably like... But, I guess he was the one doing the real sentence because he was married to a bitch. But anyhow, prior to that, I was in her classroom and she was really kind of crazy and hostile, and she would yell at everyone. But she had like a little thing for me where she would always kind of, because I was really delayed in learning, And I was a very shy kid, and I came from a loud household, so I was always scared. And I remember I brought it up to my. I used to have like really terrible anxiety going to this classroom, and I remember I would like throw up every day before, and they were like, your son has like an upset stomach, and they kind of found out that it was because of anxiety. That's how scary this teacher was. She was so scary that she would cause anxiety and she would cause me to throw up, and I would actually try to like fake get sick just so I wouldn't go. But I remember I told my teacher, she's yelling and she's crazy and she yells at me in front of everyone and she makes every other kid cry too. And I was like, but I don't want to go. I'm scared, because I'm scared because she's gonna humiliate me. So we have a conversation with the principal, and the principal was like, yeah, we can go ahead and switch you. And before that, there was like a weird meeting with a teacher. Now this is how you know she was fake, because when we were having the meeting, everything she did, it went out the window. It went out the window. Everything she did, she was pretending to be nice. And she had this like weird torture, like I wouldn't. It was a torture. It was a torture like little display of if you did something bad, it would go 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then you would lose your recess break. And then if you did that, if you were so bad, you would lose it 2 days in a row. And mine was all the way at the bottom where I was like at 30 minutes. Well, it was like I was at lunchtime actually. I was doing lunch. I was losing my recess, strike one. And I remember when the principal came in with my mom and we were having the conversation about, all the problems that were going on. I had to tell, I essentially the principal and my mom said, you need to tell us in front of her everything that she's doing. And I was like, I don't want to. I'm scared. Because why wouldn't you, You're a kid and you don't know what's going on. But she's like, the teacher, one of the things she said is, but he's not doing that bad. He's only at 15 minutes. What the? You shouldn't torture kids at all in that way. It's tormenting them. But of course, they end up switching me, and I go to a better teacher, to a cooler teacher. And she was like the teacher that you wanted to go to. She would play movies, WALL-E, Toy Story, Up. Meanwhile, everybody was in a few feet down the classroom with a teacher who was a cunt. And oh my god, I remember like 2009 was a crazy year, but it was a fun year because I remember getting switched, and had it not been for my mom, even though she was the one who was crazy too at home, none of this would have happened. And I just remember being grateful. But that was the year that it was like I said, I wasn't doing too well. So that teacher kind of led to me becoming kind of like, I guess you could say, like a near victim. But she suggested that my mom would take me to Chandler Public Library or to the public library, and this was in Arizona, and I still live here. But she said, they have free academic tutoring. So my mom was like, oh, I'll do it. So she takes me, and I'm just a wee lad boy, a cute little boy, and I think about this, why couldn't it have been me who had crossed paths with Michael Jackson? Because the person I crossed paths with was a poor, bald, creepy man that if you saw him in a dark alleyway, you would be scared. And if you were a woman, you also would be scared. Because when it came to his victims, he did not care. He didn't care about anything. Now, keep in mind, this was a tutor. Now, he wasn't a paid tutor, unfortunately. This is what makes it worse. He was a volunteer tutor, meaning he knew that he was gonna go to a place, not get paid, but he knew he was gonna be surrounded by kids. So just let that sink in. And I remember, let's just say, one thing led to another, and he did this to a few other families, but essentially the way he would try, this is the word, when you take your dog to go get groomed. This is what was going on. He was trying to trick my mom. So he would like take us out to go get food and then buy us gifts. Now, this guy was creepy, first of all. And he would make comments that were creepy. Looking back in retrospect, now I'm at the age where there was this poor girl who was like 27 who was also a volunteer. And he would make creepy comments about women in general. And I remember just thinking, man, if I was like, I would just steer away from. Sometimes the best thing you can do is steer away from them, and sometimes the best thing you can do is leave, which is what I try to do. But of course I couldn't, because I had to get my grades up, and how am I supposed to get my grades up when I'm scared of getting touched by some creepy bald dude? But anyhow, he would take us out occasionally to get food, to places, and he would like take us out to eat food, and it wasn't even like Olive Garden, it was like McDonald's, but that was like once or twice. And I remember for Christmas, he tried to lure another kid in, and he not only did he buy the big kid, this was like a kid from he looked like the kid from Syndrome, but he looked like he was down. Like, he wasn't very bright, so he kind of gave up on him, because what he would do is he would get gifts and he would give them to people. And he gave me like a few gifts. He gave me like a Lego set. He gave me he gave me a Lego set, and I of course I took it, but I didn't know Lego. I didn't care about Legos. Also, I was too worried about getting possibly like getting touched all over like I was a Twister playset mat. So I eventually built it after like 3 days of trying, but I was so frustrated. Legos, at least for me, they were like IKEA furniture sets for like middle-aged people. They take forever. You don't know if you're doing it right, and you don't know if you're ever going to finish it. And if you do, you don't know if it's going to look like the way it's supposed to, the final product. But I was terrified. And this is why every time I walk past a Lego store at the mall, I even told this to my therapist, and now I kind of like loop around and avoid it at all costs. But he was obviously a criminal. He was beloved by the library, by everybody who worked there. And mind you, this was a volunteer. So he wasn't getting paid, but he was getting paid by the ability to do crimes. So maybe in about 5 to 10 years, there's a documentary where I get to sit in front of the camera just like this and talk about it one-on-one and be like, yes, I used to know so-and-so. And let me just tell you, he was a monster. And then it cuts, and then there's a dramatic B-roll, and then it does the bullshit Netflix documentary intro of where it's sensationalized. But I remember knowing him for like a few years, and he was creepy, he was nasty. There was a few times where he tried to make it, where I don't know how I got lucky, but somehow, like the rape gods, the molestation gods, they were all like looking after me. They were just like, we'll put you in the vicinity of this creepy guy, but we won't necessarily let him do anything. We'll make you feel unsafe. He'll talk to you about horrible things, but you won't ever actually really go through with him. And, of course there's a bit more to the story, but if I tell that part, it's going to get really dark. But I'll just leave it at that. But that went on for a few years until, I kind of, of course I couldn't. I wanted to leave. Who doesn't want to leave that situation? But you can't, because your mom's like, you need to do this, and you need to get your grades up, and you can't get your grades up because I'm scared of getting possibly like, touched like a Twister placemat. That's the only way I can say it. But, this guy was creepy, and when he tried giving the Legos to the other family, because, he ended up spending, these weren't like $30 Lego sets, they were like $200 Lego sets. So, I guess, I remember one time I made a joke about this in an improv comedy club, when I used to do improv comedy, and I said, well, when I was a kid, there was a pedophile, but there was a guy who was a pedophile, and he tried to like lure me in, and he did, but it's okay because he gave me he gave me a Lego set, and it was one of the $300 to $400 Lego sets, so it's all good. And that's pretty much, for now, all I can say until there's a Netflix documentary story, which there probably will be in a few years. There has to be. In a few years, there will be one, and the truth will come out. That's I got lucky, but I feel like there's more to it. There's probably a darker story that someone has to tell. But yeah, here's the moral of the story. 2009, anything before that too, was the period of stranger danger. Don't get in a car with anyone. Don't do anything. Moral of the story, don't take your kids to Hollywood. Don't take them to a stranger you don't know. Don't leave them unattended. If they tell you they don't feel safe, listen to them. But also be on the lookout for that Netflix documentary in a few years about some bald, creepy dude who was a tutor who tried to get with do things to kids. And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they found dead bodies in his in his old living house or some shit. I don't know. But that is it for this week's segment of What the Fact. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe, stay tuned for the next episode, and have fun.